Greetings friends and welcome back into the workshop. For today's project, we are going to be turning a wooden bowl on my Shopsmith lathe. For this bowl, this is what we'll be starting with. This is the faceplate, this is the glue block, this is the blank. Let me explain what each one of those does. This right here is the blank. This is the piece of wood that the bowl will be turned out of. This is the glue block. This is what glues to the blank that the faceplate screws into so that we don't have to waste that much of a blank every time we turn a bowl. And this right here is the faceplate. This is what will allow us to connect this blank to the lathe. So I don't think you have had a chance to meet this machine yet in any of my previous videos. This is my Shopsmith lathe. Now it's no ordinary lathe. As I mentioned, it's a Shopsmith. So it is 5 or 7 woodworking tools in one. It's a lathe, it's a drill press, it's a table saw, and much more. I have not done huge amounts of research about this machine, but I have done some, and from the best that I can tell, this machine was made in the late 1940s. Everything on it, except the belt, is original. So friends, we have started turning the first part of it and it's going beautifully. The wood is very tough and hard. It's a very rough blank because it didn't start out round. So I have to go very slowly and very carefully. But let's keep going. I'll put the camera on time lapse now so that you don't have to wait 20 minutes to see progress. So let's keep going and we'll see how it turns out. So friends, this bowl is coming beautifully. I just stopped the lathe because I finished getting the general profile round, but there's one thing I need to show you, one little issue we might have to overcome. Look right here. We have a knot in the wood, and it looks like it may be deep enough to go all the way through. So with this flaw in the wood, I have two options. I can continue turning it, continue not grinding, cutting it down, and we might get past the knot. But I don't really want to make a smaller bowl. It's a little bit of a smaller blank right now. It's fine, but I just don't want it any smaller. So what I think I'm going to do is go ahead and risk that hole going all the way through, and we will see how it turns out. It may fail, we may have to make another blank, or if it's okay, if it's not too big of a hole, it may just add character to it, and I think that might actually look nice. We'll see what happens. Alrighty friends, we now have this bowl turned pretty much as we can, still keeping the top of the bowl connected to the dead center. It's now time to pull it away from the dead center, cut off that cylinder of wood that's still connecting it, and this is not the so fun part because the strength of that faceplate has to completely take the torque of the chisel cutting the outside. But I've done it before, I know it should work fine, so let's go ahead and do it. Oh, and one more thing, you saw me cut the edge, you know what I mean by the edge, what's going to be the very top of the bowl. You saw me cut that back a little bit more. I found some cracks in the grain, little tiny cracks, not a big issue. I just wanted to cut it back for a little bit, and so I'm well on my way to being covered with dust. So is my camera. I'm very glad I have a dust sealed and weather sealed camera because I don't have to worry about it, but it does get covered in dust. So let's go ahead and keep turning this. We will work on that inside of the bowl, and it won't be too long till we can start sanding it and finishing it. And you'll have to see how we finish it. I've not really seen any other bowls done this way, but I found a way that works really well. So stay tuned. So as you can see, we are starting to get down near as deep as we need to go on this. And because I want to cut this thing off right here in this groove that I've made, I need to know how far in here to cut. And now I will show you how I figure that out. So I have a very simple way of figuring this out. When I know that that right there is where I want to cut, I can stick a steel rod in, put my thumb where the edge of the bowl is, bring it out, and line up my thumb. So that right there, which looks like maybe an inch, is how far we have till where I want to cut it. So I now know that I can cut into the bottom there about 1/4 inch more, and then I will recheck it. Check number 2. There's our gap, so it's a little smaller. We can go about 1/4 inch more. Check number 3. And we now have about a 1/2 inch gap, which looks perfect. That'll leave a little bit of room to sand off down here if we need to. So let's start sanding the outside of the bowl, then the inside, then we'll go on to the finish. So overnight, with the humidity change, this bowl warped just a little bit, so it's not perfectly round. Visibly, I can't see the roundness except when it's spinning. It only varies about a 1/16 of an inch. But the reason I'm having to do so much sanding is it adjusted the roundness, so it's not sanding evenly. It's not going to hurt it in the end. I just have to do a little bit more sanding. Once we get past those grooves in there, which we are almost there, then I will go to 100 grit sandpaper. Then we'll finally go to 220, and then we will do the finish that I mentioned earlier. I want to pause right here just to give you a quick safety tip if you turn a bowl like this. You'll notice that I have sanded the sides before I have gone to the base of the bowl in there, and there's definitely a reason why I've done that. You see, if I start sanding in there, I have to stick my hand so far into that bowl that if there were any splinters around the edge of this bowl, just imagine how deep this machine could penetrate a wood splinter into your hand, and you don't want that. So I have made sure this is completely smooth on the sides. I did the outside first, but mainly on the inside, I've made sure this is completely smoothed off. When it's spinning, that way there is a much more decreased risk of this thing running a splinter into my hand while I sand the bottom. Alrighty friends, the outside of the bowl right here, let me get closer, right here, is looking beautiful. It's got a nice shine on it. I really like how that knot has come out. In fact, if you look on the inside, it did not go all the way through. There's a dark spot, but it did not go all the way through. I think it looks beautiful. Now that I've sanded the outside to 220 grit sandpaper, let's go ahead and make the inside look like that. I think we are ready to put the finish on this. This bowl looks beautiful. There's still a lot of contrast in the grain, of course, but that's to be expected. If you look right down inside there, it looks very smooth and beautiful. I think it's wonderful. So I'd say let's go ahead and put on the finish. I will explain how we do that. The finish for this bowl is simply beeswax, but the way we apply it makes all the difference. We will take a shop rag and a block of beeswax, and we will melt the beeswax onto the cloth. Now that we have this rag with the melted beeswax on it, and it's not really melted anymore because it's cooling, but we are going to take this over to the lathe and we are going to press this rag very firmly against the wood, and the goal here is to make friction. the friction will melt the beeswax from this rag into the grain of the wood, and because it will be spinning, we're also going to increase the RPMs of the lathe. Because it will be spinning, it will create a glassy, shiny, smooth wax coating that is actually melted into the grain of the wood. This is the wood before, and this is the wood after the beeswax polish. So now let's do the inside. Okay, so I have cut the bowl off the glue block all but about 1 centimeter down there. And the reason I don't want to cut it all the way off on the lathe is if I took that parting tool and cut it all the way off, it would fall off spinning, it would go rolling all over around down here and would likely get all kinds of dings and bangs and dents, and I really like the finish we have on it, so we don't want that. So we've cut it all down to about 1 centimeter. Now I'm going to take a saw and just carefully slice that last little plug that's holding it on. I just put a very thin coat of mineral oil on the bottom, and now it's done. Friends, I love doing projects, and this one is no exception. This one has been an absolute joy. Turning this piece of wood, isn't wood grain just beautiful? When you get it polished up and you can see how the tree grew, I think it's really beautiful. It has been a joy having you along, and until I see you next time, forge on.